more than I've ever loved any woman. And I've waited longer for you than I've ever waited for any woman.
Let me alone.
Here's a soldier of the South who loves you, Scarlett. Wants to feel your arms around him. Wants to carry the memory of your kisses into battle with him. Never mind about loving me. You're a woman sending a soldier to his death with a beautiful memory. Scarlett, kiss me. Kiss me once.
ご機嫌いかがですか、渡辺Danです。On today's episode of Alt Cinema, we're going to be looking at the 80th anniversary of Gone with the Wind. Made in 1939, which many consider to have been the height of the studio system, the year when the largest number of great movies were made. Now, I know that there's other more recent reevaluations of all of that, but let's keep that as a general benchmark. And Gone with the Wind is certainly the most famous of the films made that year, with the possible exception of The Wizard of Oz. And that's interesting for a whole host of other reasons. But one of the interesting things about Gone with the Wind is that it's never necessarily been considered a pinnacle of the art of cinema. It's been considered a milestone of its commercial end. It's been considered a milestone of its of the entrepreneurship that was evident in the industry because of its producer, David O. Selznick, seemingly making the movie completely independently of the studio system and it being one of the most expensive films that had been made up until that time. Yet, it maintains a rather troubling aesthetic history, perhaps because it didn't fit neatly in with the auteur theory that basically said that it was one man, one film, the old Frank Capra line, or Alfred Hitchcock, or John Ford, or Howard Hawks. Instead, it was directed by Victor Fleming, who I actually think is an unsung hero and has an incredible resume, including movies like Red Dust and The Wizard of Oz. So certainly you would think that he would be a canonical figure as opposed to one that is, by and large, ignored by most critics. But the film was also directed by multiple directors. It was started by George Cukor. It was continued by Sam Wood when Fleming had a nervous breakdown. So the real stamp on it is actually David O. Selznick's. And I think that the film, for better or worse, exists on the fact that he was able to marshal his resources this one time and make a film that was a film for the ages. Now, with current film criticism, and I'm going to be very okay boomer right now, with current film criticism not necessarily addressing the text and looking at them, how they work, sometimes because of their artistry, sometimes not because of it, but because of other factors, and what they say about the culture of their time and how they have impacted movies today. I've been paying attention to a lot of the critical response to this 80th anniversary, and I found it evenly divided between those who appear to want to make a name for themselves by being contrarian and somehow say that this is a movie that should not exist in the canon at all because of its controversial elements, or those who only look at it from a Moonlight and Magnolias perspective of, oh, don't we wish we could make movies like this, and don't you really wish Scarlett and Red could get back together again at the end? And I'm finding this absolutely disturbing because it's not addressing why this movie has lasted. Whenever a work of art lasts beyond its time, it can't be just because of authorial intent. It can't just be because of its being well made and all of that. It has to speak beyond its common generation. What are those elements of commonality that people can find that are still relevant in Gone with the Wind today? So let's actually take a journey through the film and examine some of the things about it that have kept it, I feel, vital. Number one is its storytelling. Now, the storytelling in Gone with the Wind is a mixture of some of the strongest storytelling that you've ever seen on film. It manages to grab your attention and hold it for nearly 4 hours. Part of that is because, unlike almost any other epic that came after it, the scenes in it are more akin to scenes in a 75-minute movie as opposed to one that's almost 4 hours. So its pace is breathless, sometimes too breathless, to the point where you feel you're exhausted. At other times, it's meandering. And certainly, the first half of the movie tells one narrative about the world of the South being systematically destroyed. And the second half is about Scarlett O'Hara seeming to be systematically destroyed in her personal life because of her quote-unquote sins. The fact that she was selfish and superficial and that She's a flighty person who's after another woman's husband for the entire movie. But that's actually part of the richness of it. Because were Scarlett not someone who was a flawed human being, she would be a Mary Sue. She'd be one of those people like Brie Larson in Captain Marvel, where they're just great because they're great, and you can't question it. But when you look at what Scarlett has done, aside and apart from her attraction to a seemingly completely wrong man in Ashley Wilkes, is doing nothing but magnificent stuff. She saves people's lives. She's brave. She helps a woman deliver a baby. She keeps her family from starving. When a renegade Yankee comes by, she shoots him. When she's faced with potentially losing her house, she's willing to prostitute herself. When Atlanta's rebuilding, she becomes a merchant and turns around her second husband, who's kind of a loser, into a successful businessman. Well, actually, he doesn't become a successful businessman. She's the successful businessman. Then when she gets married, and this is the most controversial part of the movie, the picture descends into some of the most hoary soap opera you've ever seen in a movie. I mean, and we're talking about the 1930s, which had the most ridiculous melodramatic moments, such as Stella Dallas standing outside her daughter's wedding in the rain because she's made this ultimate sacrifice. And yet, it still works. We're still on Scarlett's side. We're still interested in it. And perhaps the reason we remain interested in it is because of these gaps, these mysterious gaps that are within the movie that actually are where its true genius lies. And I don't even think much of it was intended, either on the part of Margaret Mitchell, who wrote the original novel, or on the part of Selznick as he was adapting it. It was partially the times themselves, the 1930s, the Great Depression, when we had seen people with vast wealth suddenly becoming dirt poor, when we started seeing a Europe between the two wars suddenly descending into perhaps another war with another enemy, and a United States which was so caught up in trying to survive that they didn't have time for that. And yet, here was a book that was incredibly expensive for that time, selling millions of copies, having people get excited about it, to talk about it, not because it was about the Civil War, not because it was a racist text, although Margaret Mitchell would have been horrified if anyone had said that to her. I mean, if you look at the book and you say, how could you possibly think that it's not the most racist thing ever? But she was of her time. And it's important to remember, the Civil War was closer to the time the movie Gone with the Wind was made than we are to Gone with the Wind. So we're looking at it from the privileged position of 80 additional years of changes in society, of advancements. And so, of course, Margaret Mitchell would be horrified if she heard a lot of the criticisms that remain today and in fact have amplified today about that particular aspect of the book. But she wasn't writing about that. She was writing about the will to survive and how those who with brains and courage come through okay and those who haven't are winnowed out. And Scarlett O'Hara is someone who will not be winnowed out. And because of that, she's able to be this supreme example. Now, let's address the big elephant in the room right up front. What about the inherent racism in it? What about the depictions of Mammy and Prissy and Pork and Big Sam? Yes, that they are cringy from our perspective today. And I'm not going to justify that, but what I'm going to do is I want to maybe reframe some of it. Let's look at Mammy in particular. Now, why is it? What is Mammy's story? Well, Mammy's story is that she's been a slave, and so perhaps her doting towards Scarlett, her seeming obsequiousness and all of that, is tied to the fact that she wants to be in the front house. She doesn't want to be out with the field hands. She wants to live as well as she possibly can, and the easiest way to do that is to be a surrogate mother for the typical soccer mom that Ellen O'Hara is, always out there rescuing other people's kids, including Emmy Slattery, that scalawag, and not paying attention to her children. And this is where Mammy's genius comes through. Because what has she done? she's created in Scarlett a rebellious personality who is able to do the kind of transgressive thing that Mammy herself is not allowed to do. And she supports Scarlett when she's doing her most scandalous stuff, going to Atlanta, wanting to marry Frank Kennedy. Mammy looks upset, but she helps. And it's because Mammy realizes she doesn't have the ability to be Harriet Tubman, but she has the ability to kind of troll the owners of the plantation. She has an ability to make their daughter not be the lady that Ellen O'Hara is trying to make her. And boy, does she succeed. And we know at the end that Scarlett has not treated Mammy badly ever, that she has helped her advance. Not fully, but certainly within the realm of what Scarlett herself is capable of doing. When she moves to Atlanta, she brings Mammy with her. And Mammy gets to live a very, very nice life. Look at the clothes she wears. Look at the clothes she wears throughout the transition in the movie. The other character that's important is Prissy. Now, Prissy is the most controversial because Scarlett hits her, and that's an unforgivable scene too. But why does Scarlett hit her? Scarlett's not hitting her abusively. Scarlett's hitting her because Scarlett sees kinship in her. What I mean by kinship is Scarlett looks at Prissy saying, I don't know nothing about birth and babies, as being a betrayal. And why is it a betrayal? Because Scarlett has seen for the first time the consequences of the kind of stunts she herself pulls. Scarlett has spent her entire life lying. She spent her entire life flirting with people and saying things that weren't quite true, and she's never really been busted. And now she sees what happens to the person who is on the other side of that lie. And when she hits Prissy, again, not justified, she is hitting herself. She's saying, oh my God, I have done this kind of stuff. This girl has done it to me. And now the two of us are SOL because we've got to help this woman deliver her baby. And they do it. They do it. And again, when Scarlett marries Rhett and they go to Atlanta, what is it? Who is it that she brings? She brings Prissy. Now, if Scarlett really didn't like Prissy, she would have left her at Tara with her annoying sisters. But no, she's not going to put Prissy in that fate. She's going to allow her to rise with her. Now, I know this seems like an extreme interpretation, but there's no other explanation for Scarlett having kept Prissy close to her, especially given the fact that Prissy looks like she made a fatal error, but she didn't, because they all survived, right? Melanie survived. Maybe Prissy saying, put the knife under the bed and cut the paint in two is an annoying thing to say. But the fact is, Melanie survived, right? And Scarlett couldn't have done it on her own. So we have that appreciation there. Now, let's talk about another area of the film that is weird. And that is the relationship between Ashley and Melanie. Now, when we see the beginning of the movie, Scarlett finds out that Ashley is engaged to marry Melanie, and it seems to be that that's the motivation for her chasing after him for the rest of the film, that she just can't believe that this plain girl is someone who can get this prize guy. But we as an audience never quite believe that, because we look at Ashley and he's Leslie Howard, and yeah, he was one of the biggest cock teases in Hollywood, but the bottom line was that he never really came across on screen that way. And so we have to take Scarlett's passion for him at least a little bit on faith. But is that faith justified? And now this is going to be a modern interpretation, and so it's going to be really ridiculous. But let me talk it through. I'm going to say that Ashley and Melanie were a Twilight tandem couple. Twilight tandem, where you have a non-heterosexual couple who kind of get married in order to keep things quiet and propagate the species. I mean, I know in today's world where it seems like everything is separated, that we don't find that logical. But trust me, the Duke and Duchess of Windsor were a Twilight tandem couple. So why wouldn't this be a Twilight tandem as well? John Wilkes is the owner of this glorious 12 Oaks plantation. So he's considering himself to be royalty. And he has a sissy son. What do you do with that? It would make sense for him to marry Ashley off to Scarlett, especially if Scarlett is hooked on him. Why not? These are capitalists of the first order. John Wilkes and Gerald O'Hara are Jonesboro. This is not old money. This is nouveau riche. This is Beverly Hills as opposed to Hancock Park. So if you're going to be someone who's of that class, you're going to want to increase your holdings. So if there's this hint that this stupid girl next door is madly in love with your son, even though she is the daughter of an Irishman, what are you going to do? You're going to have them married. Why? Because then you can merge your two plantations together. Merge your two plantations together. Now you're fabulously wealthy, and you can go to the Tarletons and say, hey, guess what? We have cornered the cotton market. You're SOL. Now we're going to buy your plantation away from you, and your twins have been spending so much time being drunk and pretending they're going to go to war that they're not going to be able to do a damn thing about it. And they could have created an empire. Why wouldn't they do it? Other than the fact that Scarlett is just enough of an honest person to where she would have probably blabbed something like that around. So they had to keep that ruse up. Plus, let's face it, when you have a rather sissified male and you have a very, very strong female, don't they make an ideal couple in reality? They balance each other. So Scarlett being all about fire and brimstone, going after someone like Ashley makes perfect sense. And why would Ashley, saying that my thesis on him is correct, why would he be interested in Scarlett? Well, why do gay men today not be able to get over Joan Crawford or Elizabeth Taylor? When you have someone who's that much of a force of nature, you can't help but be compelled by them. I would say that Ashley saying in the speech in the farmhouse after the war, when he's talking to her about how could I not love you? You've everything that I lack. But Scarlett, his speech there is right. He's admiring her. He's absolutely taken with her. Now, how does that fit in with Rhett Butler? Now, here's where I'm going to, again, maybe go a little bit too, you've been in film school too long, Dan. I'm going to say that the real truth of Gone with the Wind, why it has survived so well, is that it's a perfect pre-feminist text. And the reason I'm going to say that is because the movie is not about a woman who just survives. It's not about a woman who just does what she has to do and in the process of that loses her humanity and therefore loses the only man who's ever really loved her. I'm going to say it's about a woman who unmasks the phony. Rhett Butler is everything that toxic masculinity seems to throw out there, to use a common current term. He's brash, he's likes to drink, he shoots people, he's a buccaneer, he has all of this bling around him. But when the going gets tough, Rhett gets going. Rhett is not a hero. What do I mean by that? Doesn't he rescue Scarlett when Atlanta's burning? No. Well, of course he does. The city's burning, and you see the horse and the carriage go by, and this building falls out. How can he not be saving her? It's not where it mattered. On the road to Tara, he suddenly says that I'm going to join our army. I'm going to leave you to join our great lads in Blay. And he gives this romantic poppycock explanation, which should have been included to anybody. But he leaves her. She needs him desperately at that point. The going has gotten very, very tough, and Rhett got gone. So Scarlett is expected to maybe go to home, find it's burned to the ground, figure out how to take care of a pregnant woman, figure out if the house is there, which it is, and that her mother's dead, which was supposedly her source of power, but it really wasn't, it was Mammy, and her father's gone nuts, that she's going to have to somehow help everyone survive. Now, wouldn't it have been helpful if Rhett had been there? Charity begins at home, right? But Rhett knows the truth. He knows the truth that if he's there trying to help people at a farmhouse, that all of this bling that surrounds him is going to be revealed, that he's going to be revealed to not be this stellar romantic figure, that he's actually a coward, that he's actually a weakling. And now let's take it into their marriage. In their marriage, Scarlett tells him, I'm afraid of being fat, so I don't want to have any more kids. while she's looking at a picture of Ashley. Now, what man in his 1939 Hollywood mind would accept that? Yes, he kicks in the door and he throws a wine glass at her picture. And then he goes and visits his prostitute girlfriend. I mean, talk about a cucked act. That is just pathetic. And then later, he does agree with her. Oh, I'm not going to sleep with you anymore. All right. And then in the scene, when she needs him again, when she goes to the party at Melanie's house after she's been caught almost in flagrante delicto with Ashley, and for once it wasn't legitimate, and he abandons her again. So she has to face it. Melanie steps in, and this is why we know Melanie knows who Scarlett is. Melanie never doubted that Scarlett was interested in her husband. She didn't care. She knew that she had Ashley. She knew Ashley wasn't about to run away with Scarlett. So she helps her, but then Scarlett goes home, and Rhett tries to force himself on her, and in fact, in the film's perhaps most controversial from a feminist standpoint scene, he takes her up the stairs and supposedly rapes her. But in the next morning, she has this glow of sexuality, and she kind of even sings this little sing-song with her little British accent. And what does he do? He leaves again. He leaves. Takes the daughter to England. Okay, this is what's wrong with not having the court system back then the way it is right now. You just don't pick up your daughter and steal her and go to another country. Come on, anyway. But once again, here was an opportunity to make their marriage work. Scarlett clearly understood that, yeah, while Rhett has some issues, he's certainly a good lay. So why not take advantage of that? Maybe we can make the marriage work. Maybe, hey, you know, I'm getting kind of bored with Ashley anyway. He's not necessarily doing the books that well at the lumber mill, whatever. So she was ready for him, and he ran away. Now, let's come to the end when he leaves her. This is interpreted by way too many people as Scarlett getting her comeuppance, that Rhett has had enough and he's not going to take it anymore. So he says, frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn, and walks out. That's not his thesis line. His thesis line comes before that.
I'm going to Charleston, back where I belong.
Please take me with you.
No. I'm through with everything here. I want peace. I want to see if somewhere there isn't something left in life of charm and grace.
Hasn't he spent the last 3 hours and 40 minutes making fun of Ashley for saying just that kind of Moonlight and Magnolias BS? What is this telling us? It's telling us that Rhett has always been Ashley, but he's been an Ashley who had to go and drag. He was an Ashley who had to pretend he was tough, but really wasn't. Scarlett, at the end of the movie, even though she's momentarily upset, because who wouldn't be when your really great lay has just left you, is actually in a good position. She has 2 houses, Tara, which has been restored, the Atlanta house, which I assume they bought with cash. I don't think they had mortgages quite the same way back then as now. And she still has the lumber mill, because unlike the book, she never gave it to Ashley and Melanie. Once Scarlett has time to process that Rhett has left, if she was maybe 10 years older, all it would take would be a chocolate brownie sundae to get over it, because the older we get, the quicker we can get over our devastating romantic losses. So Gone with the Wind, I feel, has a very happy ending. And one of the reasons it has lasted for so long is simply because that vitality of the storytelling and the mysteries, those mysteries in the gaps, those hidden moments where the story seems to have an inconsistency and yet it still doesn't feel wrong, is something that keeps it well worth looking at, even through to today. And that, after all, is why we love the movies, isn't it?
Oh, I'm glad Mother's dead. I'm glad she's dead so she can't see me. I always wanted to be like her, calm and kind. I certainly have turned out disappointed.